I'm Bambi Francisco with Vader TV, the network for innovators, and I'm speaking with Esther Dyson once again. This time we're going to talk about how the internet is changing social norms and how it's changing the way we socialize. And clearly the internet has changed the way our attention span and...
Sorry, what were you saying?
Right, exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. It's changed the way we interact with people. There is just this whole idea of just one-to-one. Is that totally gone? Is that totally broken?
No, and in fact, it's more valuable than ever. I mean,
true.
We were talking about the fact that there's so many conferences now, and if online and if video conferencing were really as good as being in the same place as somebody, we wouldn't have all these conferences.
Right.
But you know, there's the attention you get when you're sitting next to someone, because we're still chemical, we're not electronic, is just different from the attention you get when you poke them on Facebook or...
It's not the same.
It's not the same.
But it's a nice way to stay at least relevant, top of mind.
Yeah, it's good. It's like good aftermarket, but you need the foremarket as well.
So you have been in tech. I've been following the industry. We've both been around before the commercialization of the internet. Yeah. So what do you think are, I mean, from the very first start of following and analyzing, I guess what's the one biggest change?
The huge difference is the power shift. We both now are able to do stuff as individual people that we never could have done before. We would have had to have assistants and libraries and an accountant. You can now pretty much operate a business as a single person, just using all these different tools and efficiencies that the internet allows. And we can speak back to power. Companies have to listen to us. You know, I could go on and on about the empowered individual and how we can do everything. And it's all true, but at the same time...
It's the democratization.
Yeah, but then you go to the airport and you get treated like garbage by an airline, and you realize, well, it's partly true.
It keeps you humble.
But it keeps you humble, and it also keeps
real.
you from believing all your own wonderful predictions about
the blog, and you're the only one reading it and commenting on it. And
yeah, you can write to the president, but you can't make him answer.
You can't make him listen to you. I was reading in this New York Times article. It's a great article, and the author says, when cyberspace came along in the early 90s, it was celebrated as a place where you could reinvent your identity. You know, that photo of the dog.
Right.
You know, it's just a dog behind the computer. You could become someone new, but you actually, in fact, you can't play with your identity if your audience is always checking on you. So I think that the internet is definitely far more transparent. What they're saying is it's transparent and reversing the original conceit of the internet. You can't just be anyone now. In fact, you're becoming more transparent. Do you agree with that?
No. Because like so many things, it's more complicated. It's a medium for truth, but it's also a medium for lies. I can go online and I can create a sort of fictitious or perhaps enhanced self on Facebook or MySpace. I can, and you can argue, well, that really is myself. I just wasn't able to realize it in MeetSpace. So it's
myself in 5 years or something.
Well, it's my projection of myself. In a sense, the internet is a place to establish a presence, and who's to say that the presence I create, the sort of the conceits I invent are or are not the real me, any more than the face I present at a cocktail party is the real me. If you're talking about the government following people, that kind of stuff, yes, the internet is far more transparent because people leave a slime trail. It accentuates the power of people both to reinvent themselves, but the power of other people to track them and to say, well, maybe you're doing X now, but here's this record of you doing Y back then. And to some extent, I think we'll become more comfortable with plasticity of individuals, that people do change over time. And the kid who had a picture of himself vomiting on Facebook 3 years ago may still be a very good junior banker.
Exactly.
The fact is, the senior bankers are probably doing the same thing. They're just not taking pictures.
I don't think that anyone's any more surprised that these
Yeah.
things happen.
I think there's a lot less hypocrisy, which is good, but it's also bad to the extent that you have people behaving badly, whether it's movie stars or kids on Facebook. And it's now accepted. People don't have, they may have been fictitious, but they don't have role models to live up to. They have, oh, well, everybody behaves badly. And that's kind of a pity, because it would be nice to have a little more good behavior out there to aspire to.
So how do you think people are, because there's so much transparency and accountability to some extent, how do you think that's changing the way sort of somebody who's 5 years old right now, who's going to live in this type of world, how are they going to be different than us, do you think?
It is such an interesting question. The first, if you like, one of the big changes was back in 200 years ago, kids just hung out with grown-ups. There wasn't really a separate children's world. And then 100 years later, they created this sort of separate children's world with children's clothes and schools and school books and really a different children's culture. And then we got to the point where kids started watching grown-up TV, so they became observers of this adult world. But now they can be participants. A 7-year-old can go online and can play Scrabble with a 30-year-old guy, or can talk about biology with a 30-year-old scientist. Right. And depending on the ability of the kid to pass, you can have it, or you can have an 8-year-old kid reading.
You can edit Wikipedia, and you can all be listening to him.
Or doing a World of Warcraft, leading a World of Warcraft team. I know an 8-year-old who does that. So, to some extent, they're being presented with the opportunity
to grow
to be part of the adult world. But at the same time, the adult world is becoming, in many ways, much more playful. So you have a world of, it's a really changing, more plastic world where, yeah, bad behavior is more visible, more present, and more tolerated, which is unfortunate. And at the same time, we've got serious economic issues. People aren't educated. They're no longer as productive at work, relatively. We used to have this kind of protected market where people doing not terribly interesting jobs could earn $80,000 a year, and now they're competing with people in India who could do the same work for $20,000 or $30,000.
Sure.
And that's a huge challenge to this protected market we've created for ourselves in the United States. So you have a whole bunch of different trends colliding, and right now we're in the middle of a financial crisis, but the bigger fundamental changes going on behind that are
the social norms and
the social norms, but also the Chinese population just is very, very large.
Sure.
And they consume a lot, they produce a lot, and we're no longer the center of the universe, but I don't think the U.S. has realized that yet.
Right, right. Though the dollar is strengthening finally.
Yeah, but that's a little
small.
That's tiny. A little wavelet on top of the.
Let's talk about this whole the whole trend of microblogging. People going on
Twitter?
There.
Yeah.
Twitter. What's the side effect, do you think, of this constant updating? Do you think, in some, I think of it, I spoke with Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey. I said, it's sort of the equivalent to me is sitting in the New York cafe and people watching. Now I'm just sort of Twitter watching. And but the other thing, on the other side of it, flip side, where people are actually updating, it's sort of cathartic almost. I think maybe. For some people, I don't do this. I Twitter my stories, but I imagine that for some people, it's sort of, I've got to Twitter today. I've got to do at least 1 or 2 Twitters. I've got to tell people what I'm up to. I'm not. What do you think the side effect is, or what is it saying about us?
Well, I think Twitter is like a lot of things, like a blog. It means different things to different people. There are producers of Twitter tweets and consumers, and that's, some people do both, but I think there are some people who do just one or just the other. And Yeah, some people's lives, I'm trying to be very politically correct here, some people's lives are of interest to some groups.
Just their lives.
Some,
just one or two
some people are of more interest to others. And, some people use Twitter to promote their products, others use them to promote themselves, some use them to keep in touch with their relatives. So it's yet another tool that serves many purposes for many different people. But as we were talking earlier, it's yet another way of extending your presence. I mean, what really fascinates me is the evolution, sex, genetics. Life reproduces itself and spreads genes. That's what it does. And then these genes create new versions of the species and so forth. And now you have, and we have, because we're living, we have this intense urge to spread our genes, which is what's behind sex, love, and a lot of things. You're seeing the same thing, but with information. People have this intense urge to be present everywhere, not in the genes of their descendants, but in the inboxes or on the screens or on the cell phones of all their friends. And it in many ways, it's that same urge to be ubiquitous and present.
This is that's a great point. That's great. I've never actually thought of it that way, but that is excellent. Back to this New York Times article, they say that the growth of ambient intimacy can seem like modern narcissism taken to a new super metabolic extreme. And I've always, I guess my question is there going to be a backlash? Are people going to...
Oh, yeah.
Are people going to say, no, I'm not even going to express myself anymore. I'm going to take myself off of social networks. I'm going to hide myself, or at least hide the information.
There probably will be a big backlash that will be a New York Times story. And there are individual backlashes right now. People who declare email bankruptcy, people who say, I'm overloaded. I've got too many Twitters coming at me from everywhere. It's people of different levels of tolerance. It's like lots of things. Some people start playing high school hockey, and then they discover they're playing one game every morning, and then they say, I can't stand it anymore. So it's all these things have kind of a, if you like, a benign level, and then they have an addictive, obsessive, excessive level. And because they're so cheap, it's much easier to reach that level. It's very hard to get addicted to caviar if you're not rich. It's pretty easy to get addicted to Twitter or email. And
it's simple. I think it was someone said it was a bumper sticker. It's like a bumper sticker. It's really easy to express yourself with a bumper sticker. Just slap it on. That's why everybody's got bumper stickers.
Yes. And so the challenge is your bumper sticker red? Is it relevant? You come up with new bumper stickers, and that varies.
Does it really matter? Do you just want to just put it out there? And a few people who capture it will.
But then you say, does what you say at breakfast matter?
Yeah.
Yet people talk at breakfast, and they do it every day, and half of it is probably completely useless because it's about the weather or the sports card. But it's a medium for communication and human interaction. I'll always remember Mark Zuckerberg said to me, this is 3 or 4 years ago, the other guys think that communication is a means of exchanging and creating information. And I think that information is a way of fostering communication. So all this stuff, in the end, if it helps humans get closer together and then helps them to marry and create children and continue the species, that in some sense that's what this urge is all about. It's this human need to connect.
Who do you think, a couple more questions, you talked about Bill Gates, but then you also talked about Mark Zuckerberg, and so there's a bit of a shift. We talk about the angel investors. I always say I have backers, the Google mafia and PayPal mafia. That's very recent, at least the last several years, that they've emerged. Who do you see as top 3 or top 5 up and coming Bill Gates? or Steve Jobs?
Well, I don't think you'll ever see the industry as centralized and as just as, if you like, monolithic as it was in the age of Bill Gates. But certainly Mark Zuckerberg's there, Sergey and Larry and Eric Schmidt. There's not, Microsoft wasn't the end of history. Google isn't the end of history. Facebook won't be the end of history. Maybe Ann and Linda will be the next. But I think we're moving beyond the internet, which is now a platform, and I think
there's going to be many people.
Pardon?
Many people that will share the limelight.
Yeah, but there will always be iconic figures. But I think that the center of interest and the center of value creation is going to be probably in healthcare, and understanding our bodies is certainly one area. So maybe it's going to be George Church, the geneticist, or
as you said, so Linda and Ann. And that's sort of my final question. I think there has been a shift in terms of the number of women who are now involved in technology. And what's your take on that?
It's nice to go on a panel and it's not all men. Yes, and healthcare is indeed much more female. You have Susan Desmond at Genentech, and you have Ann and Linda, Mary Baker at Navigenics. And it's more visceral. It's more about human beings than about electronics. So the other cool thing is I was at Bessemer yesterday, and it seems half their entrepreneurs are Indian. So it's no longer white boys from Iowa or white boys from Harvard.
Right.
It's getting, and it's not superficially diverse. Again, it's a sign that this world is changing fundamentally.
We like to kid around at Theater and say no one's been born in the U.S. None of us really have been born here.
Where were you born?
The Philippines.
Yeah.
So.
Switzerland.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And we're both females.
Right.
So the world is changing. Anyway, Esther, thank you so much. We're going to have you back to talk about lessons learned, one final interview. So stick around for that. I've been speaking with Esther Dyson. I'm Bambi Francisco.